Alright, so we got the Galaxy Tab S10 Ultra and the new keyboard case. This kind of just came out of nowhere. There wasn't really any press briefings on it or anything, but really excited to check it out. This is using a different chip. It's using a MediaTek Dimensity chip, and apparently it's just as good as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, but as you'll see in some of the benchmarks I'll do later on, if that's the case, Samsung is already behind the competition because the M4 on the iPad Pro is just destroying everything else out there. So I'll be doing a whole bunch of benchmarks comparing that product, including some video exports from like Insta360 and GoPros, etc. You know, probably stuff that people would typically do on a tablet, but first, I just want to do a quick unboxing to check this new tablet out. So I'm going to have links down below to buy these. Samsung always has the greatest promotions and the best trade-ins out there, to the point where sometimes it's even cheaper just to buy something off of Swappa or eBay and then trade it back into Samsung to get some of the credits. I don't know if you're allowed to do that, but that's kind of what I've been doing for the longest while. But anyway, wow, incredibly thin. Before I even open it up, okay, but let's put this aside really quickly. And let's just take a look at the pencil, or the pen that's also included, which is really nice to have. Microsoft doesn't include a pen with their devices, and neither does Apple with their iPad. So this is a really good feature. And one thing I always liked about it, you don't need a specific case. It just slaps right in, and it charges here too. So it's good design and good hardware right from the get-go that Samsung is implementing that the competition does not follow along with. Oh, is this a SIM ejector tool? What's this for? Oh, so it comes with a SIM ejector tool, or maybe this is just for card expansion? Let's take a look, I'm curious. So this is for micro SD card support. So if you own a drone or an Insta360 camera or a GoPro, etc., you can just pop out the card from the camera and just plug it right in. You don't have to deal with USB. So this immediately makes this way better than the competition out there, at least compared to the iPad. Anyway, that was really cool. I was not expecting that. One thing that I will say though, as nice as it is to have a micro SD card slot, having it locked behind a tray that requires a SIM tool ejector kind of defeats some of the convenience of having it. You'll always have to have this tool with you. I wish other manufacturers would implement something like what Sony did, where you could remove the tray with just your fingernails. But I mean, I don't want to knock it too much though, at least it does have it. Yes, just a USB cable, no power adapter. Before I open up the case, let's take a quick tour of the tablet first, and I'll just turn it on. I'll have it setting up while we do this. Like I said, really thin design. It feels really rigid. I hope this doesn't start to bend and warp over time the way a lot of thinner and lighter tablets do. It's a really high quality aluminum at the back. You are getting these cutouts for the antenna bands, etc. So it's really nicely integrated. And the camera bumps are pretty big too, so I guess they'll be testing out the cameras in this tablet. But overall, very simple design. I do like this color. It's like a bluish gray. And really quickly, I want to compare this against a 13-inch iPad. 14 inches is massive. It's almost too big. This is essentially the screen size of what a 14-inch laptop would be. There are times when I feel like the 13-inch iPad Pro is too large, so I kind of wish I went for the 12-inch version, to be honest. If anything, I might exchange it for it if I decide to keep this. I bought this with my own money just through Samsung.com. So let's take a look at the thinness between them. So compared to the 2024 M4 iPad Pro 12.9, they're about just as slim. I'm not really able to pick up much of a difference there, so that's pretty good. And one thing Samsung has touted with this is that they are now using an anti-reflective coating, very different from what Apple uses. So the iPad uses what they are calling their Nano Glass, and it diffuses the light source throughout the entire screen, and as you can see, it starts to destroy some of the black levels. What Samsung does, and this was introduced on the S24 Ultra, is it doesn't necessarily diffuse the light source. You can still clearly see that this is a light bulb behind me, but it does a much better job of maintaining the contrast and the black levels throughout. So even right here, you can see that it starts to gray out a little bit on the iPad. And overall, and the Nano Texture Glass also decreases the amount of sharpness, and in many lighting situations, the screen can look kind of oily and dirty in a way, which I don't like. I'm not a fan of the Nano Glass, but I think the Samsung does a really good job of maintaining the beauty of an OLED panel while also fighting glare. So this is the much better option in my opinion. One aspect where the tandem OLED usually shines is in overall brightness, because it is using a tandem OLED display, and those are made by LG, while I'm assuming the Galaxy will be made by Samsung. But as bright as the Galaxy Tab is, it's not nearly as bright as the tandem OLED. You're probably not able to really pick this up on camera, but just by looking at them, the tandem OLED is brighter. Alright, so I've had this for 3 days now, but since I'm already talking about the display, let me continue with that. This is not using the traditional AMOLED panels that Samsung has used in the past. This looks brand new. The last tablet I had from Samsung was the S8 Ultra, and I couldn't use it. There was a lot of flicker, and even though it was a QHD Plus display, the sub-pixel layout was so bad that everything looked grainy, so I ended up returning it after a while, even though I liked the overall experience. I know I mentioned it's not as bright as the tandem OLED by LG on the iPad Pro display, but it's more than bright enough, and the colors look great, really natural, smooth gradients, nice color roll-offs. And one thing that this display does that a lot of other AMOLED panels tends to fail at is capturing shadow details, where sometimes shadows will get crushed. They're really nicely presented here. There's a lot of details in the low light areas of any piece of content that you're looking at, while still preserving the inky blacks of OLED. So that's something really different that they did with this display. I don't know if maybe it's new processing or maybe it's a new panel, but this panel looks a lot better. It's weird that Samsung didn't really talk about this much, but I'm not able to measure this panel like I do with my Windows laptops or when I do reviews of Macs, because that software only works on a real operating system like Mac OS or Windows. And I know when I say real operating system, that's probably going to offend some people. But I mean, speaking of which, let's just quickly talk about the software. So I don't think tablets on Android is ready yet. There's still a lot of apps. Actually, most apps are not compatible. When you open it, it ends up opening it in portrait orientation. And since this case is in a landscape orientation, it's incredibly annoying. So that was really bugging me. But then I forgot that DeX is supported, and before DeX always felt like an afterthought, or sometimes I would want to use DeX, so I'd have to turn it on for that moment in time and then turn it off when I was done with it. Now DeX is finally ironed out to where I just leave it on all the time. For the entire 3 days of me using this tablet a lot, I've only had DeX on, and that fixes a lot of the app incompatibility issues with Android, because they open up in an aspect ratio that's similar to a phone, and it seems like I can just open up a whole bunch of apps and have them side by side. I can drag them around, I can snap windows, I can easily bounce between different programs. So it's been a really good user experience, and it's a much better solution than Apple's Stage Manager or their split view, because that requires some extra thought. You have to turn it on and off. Once you enable DeX mode, it just works. The software, especially with DeX, has been a game changer for Android tablets. So even though there's a lot of other Android tablets out there that's probably cheaper, having DeX makes this the defining feature of this tablet, at least in terms of software. And I didn't even talk about the pen support. Samsung has the best pen support out of any Android tablet by far. It is very paper-like without needing screen protector or anything like that. It's on par with the iPad, I would say, which is surprising. I'm not like really big on drawing, etc., but I do use the pen when I remember to. And now with Circle to Search, using the pen really comes in handy, and I've been using that a lot too. I never realized how much of a pain it was to take a screenshot and then try to do an image search that way, or try to share it with Google Lens or whatever. This is the new way. Oh, and this book cover keyboard slim. I'm glad I got it. With the promotion, it came free, and it's really good quality. And I like how it has a little housing for the pen itself. And the keyboard on it is fantastic. It's really nice and clicky. It's actually a lot better than the keyboards found in the dedicated Samsung laptops. So that is pretty interesting. My only gripe with it, and this is kind of a big one, is it's not adjustable at all. It only clicks into one position, so you can't change the angle of it. It turns out that it's a pretty good angle for most situations, but there are definitely going to be times when you want to change the angle of the screen itself. So I think that is potentially a deal breaker for some. Sometimes it's bundled for an extra $100. That's kind of a lot for what it is, but it's better than nothing, I guess. One concern I had when I found out this is using a MediaTek Dimensity chip, the 9300 Plus to be exact. If you're in the gaming laptop world as much as I am, you know that MediaTek typically does not have as good Wi-Fi cards as Qualcomm or Intel does, so I had to run a quick test versus the Fold 6, which is using the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and thankfully, the speeds were close enough to where it's not an issue. Thank you, MediaTek. Alright, so now I want to get into some of the benchmarks. I'm going to go through this quickly because unlike laptops, I don't think a lot of people care about benchmarks so much. Let me know in the comments, but I do want to start off with a stability test. So what this does is it runs the same benchmark 20 times sequentially, and if the tablet is starting to overheat and thermal throttle, you're going to get worse and worse scores throughout, and that is what you are seeing here. You're getting over 5,000 to start with, but once it goes down, it stays there all the way down to the very end. The reason why the last one is lower is because I decided to plug in the charger. That usually temporarily increases the amount of heat going into the tablet, and it dropped the score a little bit, but overall, it's fairly stable. But then, I decided to test this against the best Snapdragon device that I have, which is the Red Magic 9S Pro, and they're fairly on par. And then this is what I was talking about in the intro. Let's just take a look at the iPad Pro M4. Not only is it more stable, but it is slaughtering anything that Qualcomm or MediaTek can come out with now. So I can't wait to see what the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 brings and whatever MediaTek decides to come out with next.